calculate problems relating to list. We have the problem on a completion of loading a vessel of 8,800 tons displacement and a GM of 0.45 meters was listing 3 degrees to starboard. Oh, what happened? Maybe probably the duty officer is asleep, no? Or did not take part on the loading, because 3 degrees is not is very bad, no, ano? Then you are already done with the loading. But this one is very um, impossible, you know, because if but it depends on the duty officer, no, of course. Still, it is possible. However, if you are the duty officer, you must make sure that you do not have any listing, no? So let's assume that the healing tank is or we do not have the healing tank, no, because in general cargo we do not have these healing tanks. We only have wing tanks, then fixed ballast bottom tanks. So the officer on the watch needs to take part with the loading or unloading process. So it's not like with the bigger ships like uh, the Merck's own, no, uh, that has a healing tank. For the general cargo and for feeder containers, we 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 observe the shape. No, we were going back to the basic. Well, that is one of the thing which I am very proud of, because I know, no, I can explain, no, unlike those who came from the larger ships, which do not have any idea because of the advanced machineries or the the equipments that they have already to identify how much is is this the loading procedure good by only observing the rolling of cargos upon loading a certain heavy cargo. No, I can observe that one already without computing, only at looking at the movement of the ship after putting a heavy container on the hold. No? Okay, so we have here a 0.45 meter GM. Now this is very bad, because in my experience we do not exceed, no, or we have only a limit of 1 meter GM. 0.45 is very bad, no. This is it, if the ship will experience a adverse weather, then of course, no, I have already explained to you about the angle of lull. So the GA will change depending on the angle of list, no, at large heel angles. So of course, um, this one is not advisable. For container vessels and for general cargo ships, we have a 1 meter only, no? So plus the point that it listed 3 degrees to starboard. So how many tons of ballast should be pumped into the port wing tank 6 meters from the center line to make the vessel upright? That is the question. So the answer is 34.6 tons. Okay? So we have this example, the picture. No? After completion of loading, the vessel flaps to one side. But I know the story behind this ship. No? So this is at the port of sometimes their loading process there, loading and loading process is not that good. Also in China, so they do not have um, they do not follow, no, loading instruction of the chief officer as well as the duty officers. So if the duty officers are so reluctant, they do not insist the safety of the ship, then this will be the result. This is because of a negative GM, no? A negative GM because of the stowage, bad stowage. The heavy cargoes should be placed on the lower hold and not on deck. But again, in these countries, they do not follow. They just receive the cargo and then load it. No, they do not want the yard to be filled with containers. They wanted it to, if it arrives on the at port, then it should be loaded immediately. Well, when I was still the second officer, I had an experience where we are still loading at the um, hold, and there was a uh, a lightweight container that was loaded on the bottom part, and when I checked the the record of the checker or the AB, we have found out that there are still a lot of heavy which are not yet loaded, meaning they are still waiting for it, and while waiting for it, okay, you load this one, you load this. Okay, that's not the good stowage, no? So what I did is I closed the hatch cover. So I wanted them to discharge first the, because we are loading at the gantry crane, not like this one that they are loading for themselves, no? This is an advantage because they are loading for themselves. So because they have the cranes, uh, on that example that I am talking to you, we are loading at the gantry. So we are paying the gantry by pull. So they do not like my idea that I the three containers, the light containers inside the hold should be discharged and should be replaced by heavy cargos or heavy containers. So they insisted their interest, but I insisted mine. I closed the hatch cover, then stop loading. So after that, the supervisor called my attention, called the attention of the chief officer and the master, but I insisted my principle that this is a bad stowage. This should not be the result would be I will be the one to be blamed because I am the duty on during that time. So we should discharge that. Okay. So the foreman was also there and then explaining that the this is from the yard, container yard, and they don't have the control of this one. So I told him, okay, if you don't have any control, then do not load it on board the ship because I have the full control on board the ship. I told him, even if the presence of the master and the chief officer is there, I told him that way. So that's that's the experience that I have, no? Because I have been, even if before, way back 2015, I was not yet a chief officer because I recently passed the chief officer board exam last 2019. So I am just only a newly passer of the license. However, I am always applying the things that I have learned while I am teaching because I have already taught stability and trim, basic stability and trim way back 2015. So I always insist the good things that I have learned. Okay? So based on my story, to make it short, it's not easy to board a general cargo or a feeder container. No? So for the solution, we have there the formula tangent least equals weight times distance divided by displacement of the ship times gm. So we need to find the weight. So we need to interpolate, we need to derive tangent least times displacement times gm divided by the distance. Let's use the given. We have tangent 3 degrees times the displacement, which is 8,800 tons times 0.45 meters divided by 6 meters. So the weight is 34.6 tons. Okay? But if you are going to apply this in a negative GM, like for example in this example, it will not work. Even if you ballast something on the other side, it will just pluff on one side because we have a negative GM. So the best thing to do here is to unload this cargo which is um, heavy, no, on deck. So we need to unload or to restart the loading process. Okay, so that is the correct way of correcting this, because if we are going to that is much more dangerous if we are going to load something on the, or we are going to ballast on the port side, like in this case, then it will just plop on the other side. So that is much more dangerous, no? Because the containers might fail overboard. Okay, so the next example that we have, this is quite applicable, no? In order to check your vessel stability, a weight of 40 tons was lifted with a jumbo boom. The boom being 50 feet from the ship's center line. The clinometer was then carefully read and showed a list of 5 degrees. The vessel's displacement was 8,000 tons, including the weight that is suspended. So what will be the metacentric height of the vessel at this time? So if you are loading a cargo like this one, a heavy cargo, unloading, then the GM should be considered. The GM should be considered. Why is it that the GM should be considered? As you have learned in your basic stability and trim, that the rolling period depends on GM. If you have a large GM, the rolling period is short. If you have a short GM, the rolling period would be large, because these are inversely proportional to each other. Now, do not expect that there is no rolling upon discharging of these heavy equipment. So even if the ship is moored at the port or jetty, the vessel will still roll. So that is why we need first to unload this cargo before anything else. Like for example, there are much more lighter equipment, so that should be the least, or that should be the last. That should be the last to be unloaded. So the more heavier, the more priority to be unloaded in the general cargo, because we need to have a good GM. We need to have cargoes stowed inside the cargo hold in order for us to maintain a large GM, so that the roll would not be that imminent to damage the port or the vessel itself. Okay. Now, if in case that you have all of the cargos that you have is like this one, So the remaining cargo, so the remaining three or two cargoes on board the ship, you need to calculate. You need to anticipate how much would be the GM, how much would be the list if this is the GM. Okay? So is it possible for us to discharge this without the help of the short crane? Because there are short cranes available on some ports. Like I have mentioned to you, there are these gantries or indeed the short crane. But of course, if the ship is designed to discharge, no, then the cranes are also designed heavy to lift heavy cargos. So the concern of the duty officer as well as the chief officer would be the GM, the rolling period. No? Is the unloading process safe? That is the question. So for the solution, we have there, use the formula tangent list equals weight times distance divided by displacement times GM. GM equals weight times distance divided by displacement times tangent list. That is how we derive. No? So we have there GM equals 40 times 50 divided by 8,000 times tangent 5 degrees. So GM equals 2.86 feet. That is okay while we are discharging. At all times, we should keep our GM 1 meter. Huh? It should not be less than 1 meter. Okay? So again, this has something to do with the anticipation. So our discussion, these two topics that we have this morning is related with the general cargoes and the feeder containers. Huh? Because we need to anticipate in the problems that we have. Now I don't know because this one is only copied. I only copied this the problem and just explained it the way it is. It should be done to understand it easily. However, I did not change anything. No? So I believe that this question is not made purely by a mariner, no? Because if you are going to say after the loading, then you are calculating after the loading, then that is useless. You should anticipate. So probably this question is not made by a pure mariner. What I meant to say is marinated. If we say marinated, I know already what is the meaning. Okay? So marinated. So we need to anticipate. The problem should be um, how much or where do we need to store the 450 like that, no? Where do we need to, what distance from the LCF do we need to put or to store the cargo in order for us to obtain the target trim or target draft like that? Because we need to anticipate, because what is the purpose of calculating if, like for example in this problem, I would like to emphasize this. In this problem, you're already loading, unloading. So what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of determining your GM if you are already unloading? So it should be done in the opposite way before the unloading. Okay, did you get my point? Hello? I hope so nga naminaw mo diha bisan og di ko kita ninyo because I am doing my job, so it's up to you if you are going to listen or not, but to tell you this is very important, no?